Let me tell you. All right, good morning to everyone, our panelists. Before we get started, wow, there's a lot of you out there. I just want you to know that there's a light directly in my face. So if I do this, just know it's not you. Good morning, my name is Kavita Sao. I serve as a training specialist in the Ginsberg Center for Inclusion and Community Engagement within UCF's Office of Learning and Organizational Development. I am very honored to serve as your moderator today. On behalf of University of Central Florida's Office of Public Policy Events and Life at UCF, welcome to, y'all ready for this? Taxation in America. Yeah, a multi-level policy forum. There's a familiar saying that the only things certain in life are death and taxes. I said that to a couple of students earlier in the week, and they looked at me like I had grown a second head. And I'm like, y'all have never heard that before? No. Taxation touches every one of us. It shapes how communities are funded, how we plan for retirement, how public services are delivered, and what we pass on to future generations. Yet, despite its importance, tax policy can feel abstract or confusing until it affects us directly. Today's panel is designed to pull back the curtain a bit and examine how taxation in America actually works, and why it continues to be one of the most debated areas of public policy. This event is part of UCF's Office of Public Policy Events mission, established under Florida law, to provide open, balanced, and accessible dialogue on the public policy issues that shape our communities and our lives. Today's forum brings together 5 experts spanning federal, state, and local taxation, estate planning, behavioral economics, and fiscal policy research. They will offer diverse and sometimes opposing perspectives, and we encourage you to engage thoughtfully with the full range of views you hear today. Here's how the forum will work. I'll begin with an opening question to our panel, followed by a question for each of our 5 panelists. After the panelists have had a chance to respond to one another, we'll open the floor to your questions, and I'll explain exactly how to submit those in a moment. But before that, please join me in welcoming our panelists. I will introduce each of them briefly. Now, I did ask them how to say their names, and just to make sure I don't butcher it, if I do, I apologize in advance. Dr. Bradley Heim is professor and director of the School of Public Administration at UCF and a former economist at the U.S. Department of Treasury. His research examines how individuals and institutions respond to tax policy. Dr. Heim. Dr. Esteban Leonardo Santis is Director of Research at the Florida Policy Institute, where he leads analysts on state tax policy, budgeting, and fiscal equity. Dr. Santis. James Sutton Jr. is a CPA and attorney with more than 30 years of experience specializing in Florida sales and use tax. He is also an adjunct law professor and frequently represents taxpayers before the Florida Department of Revenue. Kim Frederick Heller is a Florida-based attorney with nearly 30 years of experience in taxation, estate planning, business law, and elder and military law. And Jamie Barreau is the managing attorney of Barreau Legal, PLLC, and holds an LLM in taxation with a focus on estate planning. He's also a proud UCF alum, class of 2013. All right, we ready for this? Before we begin, I do want to let you know that you will be able to participate in the Q&A. We are going to use the text messaging system that you all are, I'm guessing, familiar with. I see some heads nodding. Okay, because I'm not. To submit your question, simply text your question to 407-906-5630. 407-906-5630. You may send your question at any time during the forum. You do not have to wait. A few guidelines, though, as you compose your question. Please keep your questions concise. We ask that you pose questions rather than make statements, and that your questions allow our panelists to share their expertise and perspectives. All questions are welcome. There's no such thing as a bad question in this room. Our team will review submissions throughout the program, and I will read selected questions aloud to the panel during our Q&A portion. Sounds good? All right, let's get started. I would like to begin with a question for the entire panel. If y'all would like, you can start in a row and just go down the row, or if somebody wants to grab it first, we can do that as well. But we want to give everyone a chance to answer this question. Tax systems always involve trade-offs between simplicity and fairness, between revenue and growth, between individual benefit and shared obligation. Many people in this room have lived through multiple rounds of major tax reform over the past 40 years. From your different vantage points, where do you see the most underappreciated tension in how we structure taxes today? And what do you wish the public understood better before casting a vote on these issues? Thank you.
I'll go first. Yeah, so I think maybe I'll take the last part of that question. You know, what do you wish people appreciated? And I think, what I really wish is that people appreciated that there are trade-offs in tax policy. I was having a conversation with my mother-in-law. She's visiting us this week, and she was her daughter is working on her federal taxes, and she was complaining and saying, "I don't like paying taxes." You know, and it's like, who here enjoys paying taxes? Raise your hand. Not seeing many hands raised. You know, but then the question is, okay, well, who here likes good roads? You know, who here likes, healthcare benefits? Who here likes quality education? If we had a show of hands, I'd get a lot more hands for those. And so, there's a trade-off there. If we want the government services, we have to pay for them somehow. And there are a variety of different mechanisms, different taxes we can use to pay for them. But at some point, we either have to pay for them now, or we can borrow, but then we have to pay for them later. There's an old saying in tax policy that people gotta feel like, well, don't tax you and don't tax me. Tax me, the man behind the tree. In Florida, I guess the man behind the tree is known as a tourist that comes and goes, and but not every level of government can do that, and so really appreciating that if we want the government services, we have to pay for them somehow, and taxes are the way that we pay our bills.
Thank you.
And I'll pick up from there. I'd add that we live in a world of DIY, do it yourself. And one thing I wish that I could impart on most people is when it comes to taxes, when it comes to estate planning, it's not an opportunity to practice your DIY skills, right? Consider this, consider the implications of what you do. There are different things, different strategies that we can take advantage of. However, we don't know what's on the other side of that. And I think that goes back to this question of there's a give and take, right? And we just simply don't know what we don't know, right? So when it comes to these types of things, I like to impart on folks the tax code. If you ask me, if I'm being cynical, it's created to be difficult, right? And so avail yourself of your resources, avail yourself of tax professionals, much like my colleagues up here, to help you devise a strategy that's going to come out with a practical outcome.
Thank you.
Thing working? Working? Hey.
Yep.
All right, I guess I'll jump in. Usually I like to stand up. It's the lawyer in me. So I'm gonna go even a step further. I agree with both my colleagues that have spoken so far, but I'll go a step further. So far, in the last 40 years, what is tax policy? Does it even exist? I mean, I would argue it doesn't. What we have is a re-election policy. What do politicians always say? What do they always say? No new taxes, right? No new taxes, that government, other than the mayor of New York, the new mayor of New York. I haven't heard a politician say that in 40 years, that, yeah, we need to raise taxes. Quite frankly, we need to raise taxes across the board. Taxes are not high enough. They are not even close to high enough. We are getting a society, New York City was the first to get there, where we had mega rich and nobody could do any work. So a mayor got elected that said, hey, we got to raise taxes because people can't live in the city who do all the work. And that's where we're getting to in our society. You see it out there all the time. Not a lot of kids in here. Everybody's gray like me. But, kids can't buy a house. How are they going to buy a house? We need tax policy that controls this. You hear this crazy thing that we got going on in our state now, we're going to get rid of the homestead taxes. I'm like, what is that? That is insane. That is actually insane. It's like when I see on TV, and I'm sure my colleagues will see this when they will agree with this point. They may not agree with my main point, but they'll agree with this point. When I see on TV, I see a TV lawyer, he's taking a murder case, or he's taking some complicated, crazy case. I'll just do a pro bono. And I always think, you're a freaking idiot. We don't work for free. What are you, crazy? Same thing with the state government. If the state government says, well, we're just not going to have any income, but we can run it, it's going to be fine. Well, that's insane. That's actually insane. You cannot run a government without money. It can't be done. We live in a capitalist society, but we got to have taxes. We can't just keep going down this road of no new taxes, because eventually we get to a point where we're kind of getting to, which is we got some mega rich and then a whole bunch of people that are struggling to make it. And we just can't live in that kind of society unless we just don't want to be a democracy anymore. That's fine. But if we want to continue to be a democracy, we got to have taxes that are tax policy. The Congress's most powerful power is what? Power of the purse. That comes from taxation. It doesn't come from magic. It doesn't come from magic beans. It comes from taxation. So we need to have a responsible tax policy instead of a no tax policy. A no new tax policy is irresponsible. And thank you.
Jumping off of the idea of, I think oftentimes in public policy circles, that's where I work, we see individuals being pinned against government through taxes. The idea that the tax itself is a punishment or a chore that you have to do. I mean, even with the opening, right? Nothing's certain in life except for death and taxes. We're juxtaposing death and taxes together. Not a great look. But I think there's a philosophical angle here. And if we do take seriously the idea that we can't have government without taxes, then we have to ask ourselves, how do we envision government? And what is government supposed to be? And I think if we go back to the founding, government is supposed to be by the people, for the people. It's we, the people. And in these conversations where we pin individuals against government, we are effectively driving apathy. We're effectively disempowering people as opposed to encouraging them to take ownership of the public sector, take ownership of tax decisions, and pay attention to the process. And I do think there's something to be said about the tax code being convoluted on purpose. I think it is alienating. I think it leaves people out. But if I could change something, it would be so that people did have a stake. You gotta have stake in the game. It is our government, and it is our taxes. We typically hear about taxpayers when we want to cut something. Oh, we should be using taxpayer dollars for this. We shouldn't be using taxpayer dollars for this. But we should also have the conversation, what do we want? Do we want good roads? Okay, how much do we want to put in? That's the debate. It's not whether we should tax or not, it's how do we tax in the most equitable way so that we can get what we want out of government, out of our government. I think that is something I think we're losing. When I talk to some people, they don't think that way, which, it's okay. We can all have different opinions, but if we're going to live in civil society and have a functioning government and democracy, I think we need to be involved. And taxes are just a tool for that.
So I kind of bring a little bit of different, more unique perspective. my practice is almost entirely representing businesses instead of individuals. So I'm looking at it, to answer the question, the thing that I think most people do not grasp is how complicated some of these taxes can be on the businesses that are doing them. How many people in here owned a business in their career? Sales tax was easy, right? No, everybody thinks you go in, you pay 6-7%, whatever it is now, to be able to do, and you pay sales tax. Well, the state collects $43 billion a year in sales tax from 1 million registered businesses. The average assessment when the state comes in and looks at them and says, hey, I want to see if you did everything right, is $100,000 on that business, because it's complicated. It has an administrative burden that goes along with it, sometimes that exceeds the tax that's even being collected. And the laws are complicated. They are trying to do it right. They're doing what the previous owner of the business told them, and they're the ones that get hit for the mistakes, and they're very big. And a lot of these businesses are small, they're feeding their families with it, and it can wipe them out to make a mistake. The thing I think people should understand more is just the cost of trying to administer these small taxes you pay all the time when those taxes are being administered by the businesses. I think it's important to remember.
Thank you. I just want to talk a little bit about the DIY, because we do live in an age where we do our taxes ourselves. Is there, I don't know, maybe a time that DIY, maybe a student can DIY themselves, TurboTax is DIYing for us? How do we handle that? Because a lot of us, I think, prefer to do our own taxes rather than paying a guy a couple $100 and not, you're putting your life in somebody else's hands.
Since I brought up the DIY word, I'll go first on that one. So when it comes to your everyday taxes, I don't object to doing your own everyday taxes. Before I opened up my own firm, I did the same, right? I practiced some DIY, dabbled. But now that I'm a firm owner and run multiple businesses, I understand where my limit is, right? And when I say DIY, more importantly, in my realm, I handle trust and estates matters. And so where I become more concerned about where DIY takes place is when folks want to prepare their own trust or prepare their own will without understanding the implications that there might be when, you know, probate's involved or Medicaid planning is involved and maybe rejection of Medicaid claims and things of that nature.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're going to transition a little bit into the individual questions for each of you. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Heim. Your research gives us a window into something that is often invisible in tax debates, how people actually behave when policies change. Many tax policies are built on assumptions about how people will behave, how they save, spend, work, or comply. Based on your research, where do policymakers most often misunderstand how people actually respond to taxes, and what should the public keep in mind when we hear promises about what a tax change will encourage or discourage?
Sure. So I think it was mentioned my bio that I spent time at the Treasury Department. Individual income taxes was the area that I worked on, and that's the area that my research is on. And so, you know, especially in that area, you know, in my experience, what policymakers do is they tend to overestimate the responsiveness that they're trying to encourage, and they underestimate the kind of side effects, the things that happen that they didn't intend from the tax policy. And there's been a discussion of how complex the tax code is. Part of the reason why it's complex is that policymakers have decided that you know, the tax code is a way that they can encourage and discourage different things, And one way to simplify that tax code would be to strip out a bunch of those incentives. So I'll give a great example. We're here at a higher education institution. I think most of us will probably agree that higher education is a good thing. It's good for kids to get college degrees. And so in the tax code, there are all sorts of incentives to try to encourage people to go to college. I made a list. There's 529 plans you've probably heard of. There are tax credits, the HOPE Lifetime Learning, American Opportunity Tax Credit. There's a tuition and fees reduction. So all of this makes the tax code very complex. And so you'd hope that, this leads more students to go to college. Turns out the literature suggests absolutely the opposite, that we have all of these tax provisions and it doesn't really encourage students to go to college. The literature is very clear on that. So policymakers have overestimated what they're trying to incentivize, and what they've underestimated is other actors that can take advantage of those tax provisions. And there's got a very interesting series of studies that show that as the federal government has increased tax benefits for higher education, tuition has increased at universities that have basically captured those benefits. And so we all have more complicated taxes to fill out. We haven't encouraged the behavior that we wanted. Other people have captured it, and it's cost us money. So then the question is, well, why not just clear it out? Well, because people think they're getting benefits from these things and are worried that they bear the burden if it goes away.
Really quickly, we may have maybe one or two retirees in the crowd. Am I right? Yeah, there's a couple of them in the crowd. For retirees managing fixed incomes and savings decisions, are there tax incentives that you think genuinely work as intended? If somebody else wants to jump in on that one, it's okay.
the right one for that question. Not necessarily for retirees, but for the time kind of leading up to retirement. I'm sure all of you are familiar with 401k plans, IRAs, all of these tax-preferred savings vehicles. Again, the idea behind these, were that we want people to prepare for retirement, and so we should give people a tax benefit to do that. When these were instituted originally, it looked like they were doing what policymakers had intended, that people were taking them up, being better prepared for retirement, and so on. Turns out more recent research has suggested that really that was kind of an artifact of the data that was available at the time, and much more recent research generally shows that even the incentives that are in the tax code to prepare people for retirement really don't have the effect that you'd want. And part of that is that anytime you put a tax incentive into the tax code, there are going to be people that are going to do it anyway. It's not that there was no retirement savings before there were IRAs. There was plenty of retirement savings. And it's not like there were no houses being purchased before the mortgage interest deduction went into the tax code. There were plenty of houses being purchased. And so the issue is there additional activity, and is the additional activity worth the cost that you're spending on that tax incentive? And for the vast majority of tax incentives in the code, the answer is no.
I kind of like the Florida's policy on no personal income tax. I've got a feeling most of the retirees in this room, the policy of let's attract retirees, let's bring the wealth here, they're going to spend it here. And I think that policy has been extremely effective in the state of Florida.
Agreed, and some of us who are not retirees yet benefit from that. Dr. Santis, Florida is often held up as a model of low tax, no income tax governance, and yet the research tells a more complicated story. Florida does not have a state income tax, yet it is often described as having one of the most regressive tax structures in the country, meaning that lower and middle income residents pay a larger share of their income in state and local taxes than wealthier households. For older adults on fixed incomes, many of whom are also watching property values and property tax bills rise. What does this mean in everyday life? And are there changes that could make Florida's tax system work more equitably without sacrificing the state's economic competitiveness?
A lot to unpack. Okay.
I know.
So
I just want it to be known I didn't write the questions.
I actually want to begin with, we can even begin with the personal income tax, right? So we got rid of we outlawed personal income taxes back in 1924, so over 100 years ago now. I think that opens up a conversation, and this is going to be a little bit of a tangent, but it's connected to tax expenditures, tax benefits. I will say in the state of Florida, not even counting the fact that we outlawed personal income taxes, we spent over $30 billion in tax subsidies. So it's this entire shadow budget that has some really good things. For example, we don't tax groceries when you go to the store. But it has all of these other provisions that do not get studied. So the questions we were just asking about, oh, is this serving its intended purpose? Is it actually working for the population that we want it to work for? We don't ask those questions. When something gets into the tax code, typically it just stays there and it continues, and we don't see or we don't criticize its utility. So, you know, the outlaw personal income tax, that's one of them. I'm not saying we should have, I'm not saying we should have a personal income tax, but we should have that conversation, particularly within the frame that means the state of Florida does not have access to that, and they have to find other ways to raise revenue. So how do we raise our revenue in the state of Florida? Sales taxes. And it's true, businesses pay sales taxes, tourists pay sales taxes, but who pays the bulk of sales taxes? Households. You do. If you live in Florida, you're paying the bulk of sales taxes. Oftentimes, we try to make it seem like it's going to be your tourists and your businesses that are paying it. Yeah, they do, but it's households that are going to be paying the most of that. And because we are so dependent on sales taxes at the state level and property taxes at the local level, we do create a dynamic where we overburden families that are making less than $60,000 a year. And that's just, you know, in the literature, that's acknowledged because of the sales taxes. So what can we do about that? And then within the question was saying, well, what can we do with individuals who are, you know, age 65 and older, or just older in general? I think if we turn to the current conversation on property taxes, there's something there. I don't know if you're familiar, but the state of Florida currently is trying to, or at least in conversation, to eliminate property taxes because they're saying that, they're up. And typically they'll look at income-constrained seniors and say, look, we need to help that population. And I would say there are things we could do. Some counties already offer some tax exemptions for seniors who are income-constrained that already exist. We could make that a statewide program. I think in all of these tax conversations, we need to be very surgical. A lot of what I hear is oftentimes just, you're taking a chainsaw to a problem that needs precision. Right now, the recommendation I would have if we want to target populations that don't have the income is you can do that, but we need to raise revenue for it, and then we have to create a program that targets specifically the population you want. It can't be, unfortunately, it can't be all seniors. It can't, because if we look at just statistics on who is cost burden in the state, it's 30%. It's 30% of seniors who own their household are spending, crazy amounts of money on housing cost. And what are those housing costs? Sure, it's property taxes, but odds are you have Save Our Homes. Odds are you have your homestead exemptions, which help lower those costs. What are the big things that are driving your cost up? Property insurance, for example. What can we do around property insurance? 2 to 1 when you ask individuals, what would you change? Do you want to go after property taxes or property insurance? They'll say property insurance. I think that's one suggestion within the current conversation that we could be having, but we're not. So I know come November, perhaps we're going to get a chance to vote on whether we eliminate property taxes or not. And if we do get to that stage, I would ask, is this going to help lower your cost? Sure, but property insurance are still going to go up. And then how are you going to fund your local governments? I have more to say, but I think that's enough for the conversation.
Thank you. You mentioned sales tax, so Mr. Sutton, I'll go to you with this question. Florida relies heavily on sales tax to fund public services, taxes everyone pays when they shop, regardless of income or age. From your experience, how well does this system serve retirees and older residents, particularly those on a fixed income, who may spend a larger portion of their budget on everyday necessities. And as more shopping moves online, what challenges does that create for fairness, compliance, and the state's ability to fund the services older Floridians depend on?
All right, again, a lot to unpack. Let's break this down into the residents and retirees, the necessities question, which is the aggressiveness question, as well as online. So you touched on it earlier. Florida does a really damn good job of taxing tourists. And the structure of Florida's taxing system, I will say at the outset, it's actually unconstitutional to try to tax foreign residents more than it is residents. It's actually unconstitutional, federal constitution. So Florida is very sneaky in how they do their taxes. So how long do you have to live in the state of Florida before you become a resident?
1 year? 1 year? No?
6 months and a day. 6 months and a day, and you're a resident of Florida. At what point in time do you sign, what length of lease do you sign that your lease to live in your residence isn't subject to sales tax anymore? You guys have been in your residence quite a while, huh? 6 months and a day. If your lease is 6 months and a day or more, you pay no sales taxes or tourist development taxes, hotel taxes, state or local taxes on that lease. That's because residents aren't taxed on the leases, but they're taxing short terms, the snowbirds, the tourists that come down. It's very, very tailored structured. As residents, you guys go to the grocery stores to get most of your food. Groceries are exempt. Where do the tourists go get their food? Restaurants, right? And the restaurants are taxed. Ready-to-eat food, even if you're buying it from the grocery store, is taxed. Florida is very, very sneaky. Now, you as a resident, if you go to a restaurant, you're going to pay taxes too. And that's how they get around that constitutional loophole. The same law applies to everybody. But residents tend to go buy their groceries, and they don't pay taxes on it. There are loophole after loophole after loophole designed to help residents of Florida. You've got a problem buying clothes? We've got holidays, sales tax holidays for your clothes. You want to go buy emergency stuff for your house? We've got emergency preparedness holidays for our hurricanes, our angry turtles that take about a week to come in. You got plenty of time to go buy. Florida is very, very good at focusing taxes towards away from the residents and retirees at the same time. How about necessities? Florida is also very good at exempting necessities. You go to the groceries and you're buying medicine, you're buying groceries, the necessities of life, they're exempt, hands down. It's just off the books, not taxed. And it's very, very helpful for those with lower incomes to be able to do it. Florida really, really attacks the regressiveness of sales, the theory of sales tax, that it gets everybody in a larger portion of the lower income. Florida's been working for a very, very long time to fix that problem on the regressive side. Public transportation, it's not taxed. If you're low income, you're doing public transportation, it's not taxed. You're wealthy enough to go buy a car, you're going to pay tax. It's focused, the more wealthy end up paying more tax. If you're buying high-end luxury items, you're paying tax on all of them. And I'm a huge fan of how Florida pulls this off and does it and really gets away with it. I have not seen a constitutional challenge in a long time, except for car tags moving in from out of state got hit. I think it cost the state more than $50 million losing a lawsuit on that one. Online. So how many, well, let's ask this. How many people in here work for the Florida Department of Revenue? Good. So we're safe, all right? Now, how many of you have filed use tax returns with the state of Florida personally? See those hands? So whenever you buy something, remember you used to buy things online and you wouldn't have to pay sales tax on Amazon or all the other things, everything? That changed in 2021, a little bit earlier for Amazon, for being able to do. Well, there's a law out there that says if you buy something, that if you bought it from a retailer in Florida, you would pay sales tax. You owe an exactly equal tax cost called a use tax for the state of Florida. Very, very few people have ever paid attention to this law. A few politicians going up for elections, they'll file their use tax returns. The governor of Florida's wife got hit for bringing in a very expensive necklace imported in from a vacation, got hit from the use tax on it. But none of us were paying attention to it. I've never filed one myself, by the way, and I practice in this area of law. When they made that change where online companies that ship into Florida and they sell more than $100,000 a year, those companies now have to be treated like a retailer, and they collect the sales tax from you and they're remitted to the state of Florida. You want a revenue raiser? That has been the biggest revenue raiser in the past 4 or 5 years in the state of Florida. We've been blowing our budgets out of the water on revenue. It's why they're talking about all these tax breaks they're doing. They've been exceeding 25% their budget of what they expected in revenue from all of you shopping online and paying your sales tax. It's one of the few things that actually turned around and hit the residents for it when they did it. But the online retailers were getting an advantage over the local retailers. That some of you would go online and shop because of it. He's got something to say. Please.
Respectfully, just to push back on some of this, when we passed the online sales tax bill in 2021, the money did not go into general revenue. The money was used to replenish our reemployment assistance or unemployment compensation trust fund during COVID, which meant that if companies had, if the way that insurance works is if you're laying people off, your reemployment assistance tax is going to go up. But we didn't have to do that because we used the money from those transactions to replenish the trust fund, essentially making it so that corporations didn't have to pay more taxes. After that, we used that revenue to offset sales tax on commercial leases, which last year they got rid of. So I think finally, the money from the online purchases is actually going to go into general revenue. So I would just establish that. Also, in the tax code, it's not just subsidies for individuals who are low income. There are some which are extremely useful, the groceries, as we mentioned. But you also, if you want to get your Formula One tickets, I don't know how many of you are going to go down to Miami for the Grand Prix, but you don't have to pay sales taxes on that. Or if you're going to go to get your yacht, if you have your yacht and you have a crazy bill for repair, don't worry, the most you can pay is $18,000, it's capped. You don't have to pay more than that. Or the World Cup is coming and the tickets are like $1,000. Those are also not taxed. So I would argue that the state of Florida has not done a great job in addressing the regressiveness, because at the same time that we're cutting taxes, that we are maybe including some things for working class individuals, we're also giving great subsidies to wealthy Floridians. So I would just add a little caveat there, respectfully.
May I concur? And I'll even take it a little step further. When you're driving around Florida, plenty of houses, not so easy to buy, right? You need to lease some commercial space? No problem. Go by any strip mall, half empty, all the time. So quite frankly, we should be taxing those online guys more. So anyway, I agree with the doctor. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Heller, keep your microphone on. I'm coming to you next. You work with clients navigating business taxes, international issues, elder law, and military and veteran matters, often all at once. For older adults, helping aging parents, supporting adult children, managing a small business, or navigating veterans' benefits, where does the tax system create unnecessary complexity? And when ordinary people encounter that complexity, what does it do to their trust in the system as a whole?
Yeah, I would agree when on our first panelist, I'm sorry about your name. I'm a no-name guy. But, he had, that was his question, was what are the tax breaks for elder? And he kind of struggled, but ultimately came up with the actual answer, which is, are there tax breaks for elder? No. The answer is no. There aren't any. If you failed to plan, then the tax system just kind of abandons you. If you did plan, hey, you're great, you're in good shape. But if you didn't plan very well, there's no help out there. There's no help out there. Maybe a little bit of Medicaid. Everybody wants to be on Medicaid, right? That's fun. So, the amount of help that older folks get is really not a whole lot. There is help from the VA, I guess. They're very caring. what do you want, right? That's what you call them up, what do you want? Yeah, so I mean, the answer most of the time is there's just not a lot of help. So you really got to try to navigate a system that is not designed, is not even designed. I can't say it's not designed to help you. It's not designed. It just kind of forgets about the old folks. You know, your Social Security is not supposed to be lifetime, right? It's supposed to cut off when you die. You're supposed to die when you're about 70. So why are we worried about that? It's a problem's endemic in the system, and it really is endemic in the system. So you're trying to help folks that, you know, are especially older folks with a limited means have a lot of difficulty. And I'll go back to a question that I heard an answer to, you know, the no income tax and old people loving that. And I mean, I appreciate that, but quite frankly, how much does no income tax really help old folks that don't make a lot of money? Not that much. I mean, how many people in here are working full-time, all the time, making a lot of money job? I mean, I know us panelists are, but yeah, probably nobody in the audience. So what do you care about income tax help? Is that really helping you? Not that much. It's the other problems, which you've heard about the regressive kind of system. You know, if you're not way up there, the regressive system's not helping you. I just did my 1040. It was fun. Yeah, right. Everybody loves that, right? But I came across the standard deduction. You know where it phases out now? Anybody know? Annual income of $1.5 million. Who is making $1.5 million that needs to worry about the standard deduction? You know, that's a regressive system. It's super helpful to super wealthy, not particularly helpful to all the rest of us. I think that's my answer. It's very difficult, quite frankly. I will disagree with Dr. And this is a little funny thing, but I'll disagree with Dr. Burrow. I love do-it-yourself. Do-it-yourself all you want. It's great. I had an old probate judge tell me one time I was complaining about the probate court. It's hard to get this and that. He's like, job security. So do it yourself all you want and give one of us a call after you get it messed up. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burrow. Estate and gift taxes are often portrayed as a concern only for the very wealthy. Yet, the decisions around them touch many middle-class families. Some members of this audience may already be thinking about what they will leave to children or grandchildren. Given that the current elevated federal estate tax exemptions are scheduled to change in the coming years, what should families be thinking about now, and what are the biggest misconceptions to hear from clients who assume this issue simply doesn't apply to them?
Well, thank you for the question. I'll start by saying a failure to plan is having a plan to fail, right? So let's keep that in the backdrop. But I will tell you this, you know, I have a lot of criticisms about our tax policies, but as it stands right now, we do have very high tax exemptions when it comes to estate taxes, right, and gift taxes. So for instance, right now, if you were to pass away and your estate is under $15 million, your estate won't be liable for estate taxes. If you pass away married, right, you have the opportunity to elect to use your spouse's $15 million. So married couples, essentially, you have $30 million exemption. If you don't have an estate higher than that, as it stands, perhaps estate taxes are not something to be concerned of immediately, right? Although I tell my clients all the time, I'm rooting for you, right? I hope you give me a call tomorrow and tell me you are over that amount, but until then, we're fine, right? But I'll give you an example. I was speaking to an individual who hired our firm to handle his father's probate, and his father passed away with an $18 million estate, and unfortunately, he had not done proper planning ahead of time. And so what that resulted in was roughly a $1.6 million tax bill to his estate, right? And now these are funds that are not going to their intended beneficiaries, right? So keep that in mind. But back to our everyday people, much like myself, who are underneath the exemptions, right? While you don't have to necessarily worry about that, something to consider are, going back to our first question, the implications of what we do, right? So many of my clients, especially my elderly clients, they say, okay, well, what if I just transferred everything to my child now, right? That way, they don't have to deal with the courts. For the Medicaid office, I own nothing, right? Couple of problems with that. One, there is a 5-year look back for Medicaid purposes, so you could be penalized depending on when that transfer is done. And two, you may be putting your children in a less than ideal tax situation, right? So as it stands, when you inherit property, it comes with a tax benefit. Essentially, your basis gets jumped up to whatever the value was at the time of death, which really significantly reduces or eliminates capital gains tax for your children, right? But if we transfer it as a gift while you're alive, well, now you've taken away that benefit, and now they take your basis. So when they eventually sell the property, they're not going to get the same benefit that they would had they inherited the property. So this goes back to my favorite word of the day, DIY, right? Unintended consequences of the things that we do.
All right, thank you. I would like to open the floor up for questions. We have...
Yeah, well, okay, so I have actually 28 open questions, but I will tell you that a huge chunk of them are about the elimination of property taxes controversy. And I guess the real question is, if we did that, what are the other highest rated streams of income to compensate how those services are going to be continued? I think everybody's got an opinion.
There was a bill out there to raise sales tax, the state rate, from 6 to 9%.
Okay.
None of the bills have passed right now. That one's not anticipated to pass, but that one was floated out there. If you've been in Florida long enough, in around 1990, they put a sales tax on just about every service out there. I think it lasts 6 months. There were only 4 taxes that stuck around after that. I call it the 4 industries that had absolutely no lobby whatsoever that year. Stayed on them. To be able to do, you can raise hotel, rental car taxes, things, and focus more on the tourist side. And that can go directly to the local governments. I will say you will hear a lot talking about the amount of money that residential property taxes get. But the property taxes on a homestead are about less than 1/3 of the residential property taxes. So the loss of revenue is a lot lower than you'll hear in a lot of articles and discussions out there to be able to do. So you've got a much smaller number to replace. And as prices go up, our taxes go up. That's sales tax. You don't have to increase tax rates for taxes to go up when it's sales tax. You just need inflation. And they do go up. And they grow, and they do. And as the population increases, we have a lot more people speaking, and he's ready to fire back.
Here we go.
I'm going to get it, there we go. I could figure it out. All right, so I hear that, and I understand that. But my argument is, homestead property tax is already low. How many people in here own like 3 or 4 houses? Anybody? Anybody own like $3 or $4 million houses, $5 million houses, $7 million houses? We got a lot of people in Florida that do. Trust me, they cannot wait for those property taxes to be eliminated. That would be great, right? So if you got a $15 million house down in wherever it is, something Del Mar, then that's great. No, I don't have to pay property taxes. Or I'm on Palm Beach, actual Palm Beach, next to Kennedy, and I'm loving no property taxes. That's great. So you know that is a truly regressive tax, eliminating that tax, because it only really benefits the mega rich. And quite frankly, as a policy question, that is something that I would argue we do not need to do. We need to be helping the less wealthy retirees. We need to be helping our middle class folks. We need to be helping even our upper middle classes. We don't need to be helping the mega rich. We don't need to be helping people that own multiple million-dollar places. And so that's my position.
Do we have another opinion?
just quickly add. it's 36% of the tax base is homesteads. That's around $18 billion. So it's not nothing. How are you going to replace $18 billion? Not every county has the same level of access to tourism dollars, for example. So you're going to have some counties, particularly rural counties, that are, what are they going to do? So it is a big policy problem. No one has actually proposed how to finance this. There's no plan. A lot of the conversation has been if we pass a joint resolution, which is what it would have to be for it to be voted on in November, they're saying we're going to come back and do implementation later. There's a big hurdle there with implementation because we have a supermajority requirement to pass any tax increase in the state of Florida, which means you would have to get the legislature to agree on whatever tax increase to raise $18 billion, which frankly I don't see happening. So now you're going to have local governments without the funding, unlikely that the legislature is going to come back and raise that revenue. So what's going to happen? Yeah, we don't have any guidance on what's going to happen. There might be a special session around property taxes. We're looking out for that, so stay tuned.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. So one of our master's students is actually in the finance department of a local county, and they've run the numbers. And yeah, I mean, you know, they'll need to make up money somehow. And so, you know, at the end of the day, if there aren't offsetting tax increases, which I think are unlikely, you know, there are two options at the county level. One is you increase user fees, where you can increase user fees. So I moved here from Indiana this past summer. You know, I did not budget for the large amount of tolls that we are paying, you know, driving downtown and driving back. You know, it's a user fee. And so, you know, counties can institute more user fees, increase the costs of the local recreation, you know, and they can cut services. You know, yeah, that county finance person. There had been expansions of roads. They're just going to let those roads sit, and eventually, you know, in roads that should be, you know, repaved, they'll just, you know, kind of not seal and let go. You know, you have to close the budget hole somehow, and so you can either charge fees or you can lower services.
Okay, I got two questions I want to ask based on what you just mentioned about tolls. What do tolls contribute? What percentage do they contribute? And secondarily, what about the lottery? Okay, let's just go with tolls first. How much to the revenue stream do tolls contribute based on other things like sales tax, for example? Somebody knows the answer, I know. Somebody has an opinion.
I don't know the dollar amounts. I do know that most of the tolls are designed legally to first pay the bonds back for building the roads.
Okay.
First, so it doesn't go into the general fund. It goes back to pay the bonds to build it and to maintain it. So they build up a reserve to be able to do that. And then afterwards, they decide whether or not they're going to keep it for general fund. But I don't know the numbers.
Okay. What about the lottery?
I could talk a little bit to lottery. I don't know the
Okay, good.
numbers, but I can tell you what happened. I come from a family of school teachers. Wife's school teacher, daughter's school teacher. Everybody else seems to be a school teacher except me. But you know, the promise was lottery money was going to be used for schools.
Mm-hmm.
That happened, didn't it? It did happen. But what did they do with the money that was lottery money that was equal? They took it out of the school budget and put it somewhere else. So
The biggest shell game politically you've ever seen in the state of Florida was the lottery.
beautiful
Yes.
shell game. That is
They are not allowed to account for the lottery money when setting up school budgets. And then whatever money they set for school budgets gets immediately put out into the general fund to spend on whatever the legislator wants, and the lottery money gets plugged in. So it's really a shell game. The money's going into the general fund.
well said.
Okay, question. There's a new senior deduction, standard senior deduction right now that's just been introduced. How is that really going to help seniors? Anybody got any opinions on that?
I saw it, and I was looking at it, and I thought, man, I'm going to get a senior deduction. First of all, you got to be 65. So
Okay.
it doesn't apply for you're on the AARP. No, sorry, get that when you're 55. You don't get any of that. It can help seniors. I would say it can help seniors a little bit, but the net effect is going to be, unfortunately, not that great. It's there though. I mean, I will say it can help seniors. It will actually help seniors, I think. So there you go.
Okay. What are your views on changing IRAs to Roth accounts? Okay.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I guess the question is, are we talking about a policy matter, or are we talking about a kind of a personal choice?
It's a personal choice.
Yeah,
I'm
but
pretty
so
sure.
for personal choice, it all depends on what you think is going to be the kind of flow of tax rates in the future. The difference is regular IRA, you pay when you withdraw. Roth IRA, you pay the tax now, but you don't have to pay when you withdraw. And so the question is, do you think rates are going up in the future? If you think they are, either because of your personal circumstance or because of policy, if rates are going to be higher in the future, you want to realize that tax now. If not, then vice versa.
I think for retirees, there can be an opportunity to convert your traditional IRA to Roth IRA, in particularly low-income years. Take a small income tax hit on the year of conversion and then let it grow some more and pull it out tax exempt. There's definitely some benefits there for retirees to pay attention to it.
Okay, next question. We talked about the personal income tax lack of in Florida. So what led to that decision, and more importantly, do you ever see it being reversed, and why might that happen?
I don't know about reversed, but I will say back in 1924, if you were to read the periodicals of the time, the people that were pushing for the campaign, the message was, hey, if we do this, we're going to bring down wealth, we're going to bring down investment, we're going to get people to move here. There was a housing bubble later in 28, but let's not think about that. 100 years later, 50% of Floridians can't afford to live in the state. We look at the promise of 100 years back. Has it materialized? I think that's what we have to ask ourselves.
Okay,
They could afford to live here less if they were paying income tax.
okay, okay. Okay,
Agree.
okay. Okay, how do each of you feel about a flat tax? This is probably going to be our last question. Do you think it'll ever happen? And what would the unintended consequences be, do you think? Flat tax, what's your opinion?
Because I'll start.
Okay.
I hopefully pray that it will never happen. The definition of regressive.
If it does happen, the exemptions will turn it back into a tiered system by when you get the exemptions against your flat tax. They'll end up mathematically making it close to the same thing it is now.
Next year, the Taxation and Budget Reform Commission is going to assemble. This commission every 20 years, it's built into our Constitution. They assemble, they are appointed by the governor and the legislature, and they're able to put language directly in front of voters. Last time this happened, there was a conversation on personal income taxes. It didn't make it, but I just want to plug that in terms of things we should be looking out for. I think next year's going to be interesting. I don't know if they're going to propose a flat tax. I hope they don't.
Yeah, I don't think a flat tax is coming. I mean, we've talked about complexity and, it's a hassle for everyone, but it also benefits lots and lots of people. And anytime a flat tax has been proposed at the federal level, immediately the lobbyists start working on it and the proposal goes nowhere.
We are out of time, gentlemen. Thank you all so much for being here.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. On
Kavita,
behalf of
Thank you for being here.
of UCF's Office of Public Policy Events and Life at UCF, I want to sincerely thank each of you, Dr. Bradley Heim, Dr. Esteban Santos, James Sutton, Kim Keller, and Jamie Barreau. Thank you all for being here and for sharing your knowledge with us. If you haven't done your taxes, it's due next week.